Alright, so Renfield is the latest vampire movie to hit theaters. It stars Nicolas, Hoult, and Nick Cage, or at least that's what the marketing wants you to think. It actually more so stars Nicolas, Hoult, and Awkwafina. Ben Schwartz actually might have more screen time than Nick Cage too. The setup is basically, since the events of the original story of Dracula, Renfield has been Dracula's familiar, helping him find victims to sustain himself with, and that's continued all the way up to present day in New Orleans. With that setup, they could have taken this thing a whole bunch of different ways. They ended up going with like an action comedy, which was definitely an interesting idea, but I don't think it totally worked. The movie is overall very disjointed and tonally inconsistent. The crazy over-the-top fight scenes with the martial arts moves and excessive gore are reasonably entertaining. They clearly were going for like intentionally over-the-top comedic levels of violence. There's even a Mortal Kombat X-ray move at one part. But they're sandwiched between all these parts that are basically a generic cop versus the mob revenge plot with Awkwafina. That's where this movie pretty much failed in my opinion. The supposed main character of Renfield doesn't really have a proper plot line for himself. They sort of just work him into her storyline and use that as a vessel for him to sort out his own issues. The only thing even really clearly making him the main character was the narration bits, which I actually thought were pretty whack and unnecessary anyway. With the lack of cohesiveness felt throughout this movie, it seems like the editing process was probably an absolute nightmare. But I've gotta wonder how much got cut with Nick Cage in it, because seriously, for the way this was like borderline marketed as starring Nick Cage, he's got a shockingly low amount of screen time. That said, when he's on screen, easily the best part of the movie for me. They definitely let him go full Nick Cage, and with the character of Dracula, it worked for sure. I just wish there was more of it. Nicolas Hoult is good as Renfield. He does his job well. I think he's a good actor. There's just not that much to the character, honestly, so he's doing a good job with a character that's not written that well, so ultimately I don't think this is the type of role that's going to be super memorable down the road. Awkwafina is fine too. Not gonna lie, I'm not a huge fan of her generally, and her humor in this movie felt completely flat for me. It's basically just her yelling "shut the fuck up" at other side characters. But like, somebody wrote that into the script, so I'm obviously gonna lay the blame at the feet of the writers with that. Visually, I actually really liked the color theme of this movie, and the makeup and effects on Dracula and the scenes where he's like half dead and still coming back to full power were actually really good and grotesque, which kind of makes it seem weird that unfortunately for most of the action scenes and kills, the majority of the blood and gore seems to be CGI rather than like actual fake blood and practical effects, which was unfortunate because it just felt like it cheapened the movie a bit. Overall, I just can't really say this movie succeeded anywhere other than the hook of having Nicolas Cage be Dracula. It's an action movie, but the action's not that remarkable. It's a comedy, but it's really not that funny. It does have its moments, don't get me wrong, but they're pretty few and far between. Cage's performance was enough for me to at least say that the movie's worth checking out if you're a fan of him, but overall as a finished product, the movie's definitely mid. I'd say it's the kind of movie you could just throw on at a social gathering or something just to have people be entertained when Nick Cage pops up on screen every once in a while. There was potential for this to be really good, I think, if they just leaned more into the comedy and away from the action and mafia bits, but ultimately it feels like they weren't even sure what kind of movie they were making when they were filming it, and the movie we got was just like the best that they could hack together with the footage that they had at the end. I suspect the narration in the movie might have even been a completely post-production add-on because it feels that out of place. Anyway, yeah, that's all I got with this one. Definitely thought it could have been better than it was, but I'm sure there's still plenty of people who are gonna have a pretty good time with this one. If you've seen it, let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Peace.